My name is Garrett Fishman, and I want to welcome you to the third program in the Voices of Hope virtual summer series. Voices of Hope is an organization founded by descendants of Holocaust survivors with a mission of promoting a culture of courage to stand up against hatred through Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance. I hope that you enjoyed last week's program with Rabbi Marcelo Cormes on faith after the Holocaust. In case you missed it, feel free to go to the Voices of Hope website or Facebook page to find a recording of the presentation. This week, we are pleased to be welcoming filmmaker Michael Turner. Michael Turner is the creator of The Way We Talk, an award-winning autobiographical documentary that has screened around the world and contributed toward a paradigm shift in how stuttering is perceived. His second feature, Momentum, about Holocaust memory and inherited trauma, is currently in production. Michael's grandmother, a survivor of Auschwitz, was never able to talk about what happened to her during the Holocaust, but at the end of life, she returned to her hometown in Hungary to build a mysterious memorial for the town's Jewish people, including her family. Monument documents Michael's first visit. Oh, sorry, said I was muted there. The heavy stones that she laid in the town square of Sárvár, do they still talk? Tonight's moderator is Isabel Corman. Isabel is a West Hartford native now living in Washington, D.C., has studied and been involved with Holocaust history and preservation for her whole life. She earned a degree in Jewish studies and comparative literature from Emory University, where she organized TEDx Emory, local organized TED Talks, events for 4 years. Since graduation, she has worked for Hillel for just under 3 years, supervising an annual Holocaust commemoration for over 1,000 people and mentoring Jewish students, leaders to take ownership of their own stories. So let's give a warm welcome to Michael Turner and Isabel Corman.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm calling in from Oregon, USA. So it's a pleasure to see all of you. I am a filmmaker, but I just tend to make autobiographical movies about my life and my family. And so to do a movie about my grandma, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, was something that I've had in my heart for a long time. And yeah, I thought I would start by playing you the trailer for the movie, because that way you can get a feeling for her a little bit and the story. And then I can talk a little bit more about the process of exploring our family history and making that film. That sound okay with you guys? I'm gonna try to share my screen here, and hopefully it's not too choppy. Let's see.
Probably the Hungarian pronunciation is different, but your hometown was spelled S-A-R-V-A-R, Sárvár.
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 I could not face going back. My husband always asked me every time he took a business trip to Europe, if I wanted to go. And I could not go back to Europe. I just couldn't face it. And last year I said, okay, I want to go. And I did go, and we went to Hungary. And we went to my hometown. And I could not remember anything. I couldn't do it. I had to leave. I spent about an hour, not even that long in town, and I had my
just beginning to understand. My grandma went back to Hungary for the first time since she was 17 and had a really disturbing experience there. She went back to her hometown called Sárvár and found that the Holocaust had completely wiped out any evidence that Jewish people ever lived there.
I just really didn't know what to expect when I went back. After so many years and so many things happened, that I don't think anybody knows what to expect.
But it was hardly a happy trip back.
It wasn't, really. I want to make some kind of memorial.
There's no memorial to the Holocaust in your town.
Not even that, just the people that lived there. There's a whole race gone.
I was too young to know the right questions to ask, but I could tell that something had changed inside my grandma. She spent her final years going back and forth to Sárvár, building a monument to everyone she knew growing up who had disappeared. I never got to talk with her about what exactly happened to her and her family in the Holocaust, but the monument is still there, waiting for me. What would I find if I actually went there? And especially now that I'm a dad, I have to figure out how to pass on her experiences to my daughter one day. I'm asking for your help to get this film made. It's a story about the loved ones that we carry inside us and the unexpected ways they continue to affect our lives. Thanks so much for your support. I'm excited to share it with you.
Igen, és akkor felvetődik az emberbe, hogy ők honnan fogják megtudni, hogyan fogják ezt továbbvinni. Mert hagytak nyomot a zsidók mindenhol, Sárváron is, mindenhol hagytak. De ki viszi tovább?
And I think people not only get closer to their family history, but they also learn how to cope with certain anger and loss and mourn what was lost behind by putting up monuments, by writing articles, by writing books about it. Because what is a book? What is a poem about a family or a beloved person? It is also a monument. It serves a monument. It serves as a monument.
I have to do it because of my daughter, of my grandchildren. They have to know. You have to tell the story.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. Hopefully that looked okay and it wasn't too choppy. Zoom's kind of a tough platform for playing videos, but I hope the message was there. So the film Monument kind of came out of wanting to do something with my grandma's life story, even if it's just for my daughter or my family. And it really started to become a bigger project when I went to Hungary last year and actually saw the monument itself and felt like there was really something about monuments and how we're continually like leaving evidence of our own lives behind us, which is what I've tried to do with my movies. And I saw that same thing in what my grandma did with her monument, or her memorial to the Jewish people of her hometown, Sárvár. You know, before I made this, this film is in progress still, but the previous film I made is about stuttering, which is a genetic speech issue, which I speak with. And I really loved making that film because it was a way to kind of like open up about parts of our family story that we had just never talked about. Like my brother stutters too, my mom and my grandpa also stutter. And none of us had ever talked about it. And so that story became kind of not so much about stuttering, but just opening up about things that are hard to talk about. And so I really feel like this film is part of that same conversation, where my grandma was never able to talk with us about her experiences in her hometown. Like she would say little things every now and then. And I remember even being a kid and asking her if we could go back to Sárvár one day, because she was telling us some cool story about her childhood there. And like her face just changed and she said, no, I would never go back there. And I just didn't really understand why. And it wasn't until I got older and started learning about the Holocaust in school and learning about what Auschwitz was that I really started to connect her to this larger issue of trauma and memory. So whether we talk about things or not, they get passed down in one way or another. And I felt like by basing this film on her monument, which was her way of telling us her story or trying to leave something behind of her story, it was a way to not, because I can never understand the Holocaust. Like I can never understand what it was like being alive at that time, being in the situation that she was in at that time. And so for me, it's completely meaningless to try and like describe her story alone in terms of a film. Like I feel like it had to be through my own experience and coming to understand what she was trying to leave, and like her experience in leaving something for me and my brother to better understand what she went through. If that makes sense. Especially after I became a father myself, and like also having that urge to make sure that my daughter understands what my grandma experienced. So to me, this monument is really, even though it's made out of stone, like most monuments, it's an incredibly fragile thing. It almost feels like if everyone in this little town would just look away for a minute, it would just disappear. And for many years, that's kind of how it was in my life. Like she built it when I was 14, and it just, you know, like I knew she was making it, but I just had other things going on in my life, and it just became invisible to me for many years. And I feel like looking at it now and trying to understand what she experienced at that time, it's much more of like a ethereal thing. It's like, even though it's made out of stone, it's kind of just like a marker of an existential crisis that happened in her life that is now given this like physical form. And so I wanted to go there and see it and touch it and just kind of be part of that. I'm going to try and share my screen again too and show you guys some pictures. That's her in front of her monument right there. We'll come back to that. This is a quote that I liked a lot. It came from one of Elie Wiesel's students, who talks a lot about how Wiesel, who wrote Night and a lot of other books, which you guys I'm sure have all read or know about his work, but he was really a proponent of like the like main ingredient of education being memory. And so like, how do you teach memory? And so I think just like with a monument, we have to constantly be reckoning with the past and trying to find ourselves within it. And like each generation has to go through that journey over and over. This is me and my brother in front of our synagogue as kids. And if it's okay, I'm just gonna like talk like a little bit about just my history with Judaism and Holocaust education, I guess, because I think it is like not unique, where my grandma, when she came to America, she was 19, and she was raised in an Orthodox family in Sárvár, Hungary, which is just like a little town in Hungary. It's on the Austrian border, and it was like this little town of 10,000 people, but they had 2 synagogues there and just like a very like large, thriving Jewish community. But when she came here, she became completely secular and never went to synagogue. I never saw her like participate in like a Jewish holiday or really have like any interaction with faith at all. Like what I did see in her house, in every room, on every item she owned pretty much, was an American flag or some kind of Americana. She was just, coming here was so meaningful to her, and she really just wanted to leave her old life behind. But it was my mom who wanted me and my brother to go to a synagogue to like learn about these rituals that she had never grown up learning. Like recently my mom told me that she had never even heard the word God growing up. It was just like a concept that was completely foreign to her. And I just really found that fascinating. And like, I always felt like kind of an outsider in the synagogue, because it always seemed like everybody else knew what they were doing. You know, they like knew the prayers and the songs, and you know, I would hear people chanting stuff and all of a sudden they would bow, and I just really just didn't know what was going on. And to an extent, I still feel that way. Like I've never really had like a formal entrance into like the Jewish faith, I guess, even though I still like, I identify as Jewish, and there's like a lot of things that I've learned about Judaism that are really beautiful. I still feel like the like heart of it was left in Hungary with her family who was killed. But this kind of like changed when I got ready for my bar mitzvah. That was when my grandma went back to Hungary for the first time. I want to say 11 or 12. And she didn't really talk with us about what was happening. I just know that she, at some point, suddenly went after saying she would never go back to Hungary. She never wanted to speak the language again. She was, I mean, to say that she was done with it was an understatement. But all of a sudden, she went back. And by some miracle, she was a guest on her local cable access show after this trip. And we have the tape of that interview. So I'm going to play you guys a short clip here. Whoops. Oh, there's me at my bar mitzvah. I'm going to play you a short clip here of that thing. Should have pulled this up earlier, but.
Now you're sitting.
Okay, hope you can see this. Okay. Let me see. Wonder why that would be.
Now your sister was what? Just a little bit younger than you.
She's a year and a half younger than I am.
So you were like 15 and 13.
Right. And she survived too.
When you arrived at Auschwitz and when you were first there, did you know what was going on in that camp?
No, we didn't know anything. We had no idea. It was just almost like a nightmare. And you don't know what's going on. We didn't know what was going on. First place, we were too young, and I think that even if we were older, we didn't.
So that was her just talking a little bit in that first interview. How's everybody, by the way? Is this interesting, or should we change it up a little bit or something? Yeah, it's so like weird when everyone is just quiet. But anyway, I just like that interview because my grandma still feels like she's in shock. It's almost like seeing that she's in shock still. She had gone back to her hometown and was able to stay there for an hour, which is kind of incredible to think about, going all the way to Hungary and not even Budapest. I mean, it's complicated to get to Sárvár, and she just could not bear to be there. And it's interesting too, in this interview, she like gets a lot of facts wrong about it, about when the people of Sárvár were put into the ghetto, how long she was there, and just other facts. Even coming here, it's like she was still like kind of mixing things up a little bit, which at first I was kind of like put off by, or like didn't really know how to handle that, just because there is this obviously this element of Holocaust denial in the world that I didn't want to feed in any way. But I also feel like in my research, kind of getting more comfortable with that idea that we don't come to these testimonies for facts necessarily. There's like so much historic documentation of what happened in the Holocaust. Like I feel like the most important thing about these testimonies is much more like to understand her frame of mind and like what it's like to become like reconnected with this traumatic memory that she had buried for 50 years and is only now starting to like confront. And I found a quote that I'll pull up here that I thought was really interesting. Might be, let me see if I can move it. But there's a book called Writing and Rewriting the Holocaust by James Young that really kind of like opened my eyes to the experience of trying to tell a Holocaust story, especially from the perspective of someone who wasn't there. And to really look for these testimonies as he says here, the manner in which survivor witnesses have understood and expressed their experiences, the kind of understanding that they now bring to such disaster, and the ways in which they now understand the world in light of the Holocaust, which actually made telling my grandma's story seem that much more important or relevant to now. So that's us there. Whoops. I don't do a lot of presentations, but this is cool. And I mean, anyway, I won't ramble on about that, but I do feel like the difference between reading a history book and telling a story is really interesting when it comes to something like the Holocaust, where having it being like accurate is so important and essential. But it's also a story that I'm telling. And like anyone who makes a film or writes a book, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, is still like an edited process where like you are choosing which experiences to include and exclude and how to shape it in a compelling way. And so just really thinking about that in terms of my grandma's story and wanting to honor it and tell it as truthfully as I can. But I feel like part of that is showing her as like a complicated person. You know, she like wasn't a perfect person. She was a very complicated person. That comes from, I'm sure, the experiences she had when she was young. And so I feel like by honoring her and her whole community, it's like so essential to show her as like a human being with like a fragile memory and who went through some of like the hardest experiences anyone on earth has ever endured. So next I'm gonna play you guys a clip from her interview she did with the Shoah Foundation in 1998, which is kind of like the crux of this movie in a sense. Like I wouldn't know her story at all if Steven Spielberg hadn't created the Shoah Foundation and they were going around filming all these interviews with survivors in the 90s, and they did an interview with both my grandma and her sister. So it's like having her story told through these two perspectives is just like it's just a miracle that it exists for our family, and I'll be endlessly grateful to them. And I can remember them coming to my grandma's house that day because me and my brother would stay with her for extended periods in the summertime, and just how nervous she was and how important it was for her to share this experience. And me and my brother weren't allowed to be in the room so she could, tell like the whole story. But I feel like just seeing how a camera could allow someone to open up about things that they like had been silent about. Like I can see now how that influenced the whole course of my life. But I'll see if I can pull up a clip here.
Good morning, Mrs. Craig. Would you please state your name?
My name is Alice Craig.
And what was your name at birth?
Alice Lichtenstein.
And where were you born?
In Hungary, Sárvár, Hungary.
Would you kindly spell Sárvár?
Sarvar. When I came here, I never spoke another word of Hungarian. People speak to me Hungarian. Till this day, I would speak English. I never speak Hungarian.
And why is that?
I never wanted to go back. I never wanted to speak. I guess, wanted to forget the past.
This is my grandma with her two little sisters. You can't see me. Oh, maybe you can see the little pointer there. That's my grandma Litzy with her little sister Edith, who is almost 2 years younger, and then her sister Anna, who's much younger. But yeah, I mean, they were just like normal kids, like any other kid. Seeing the war kind of descend on Europe at that time. And, you know, kind of going to public school and then having the rocks thrown at them and the names called and having to go to a Jewish school, which then even became too dangerous. The ghetto, and then finally being deported. Obviously, there's like a lot there, which, you know, I can talk about for like a long time. Just to imagine her at that age. What's interesting is like her father, Marcus, who was the town baker in Sárvár, the kosher baker. That's him right there. And my grandma's mom. He has like an interesting story too, because he spoke 11 languages and was often used as a translator for these occupying forces that would come through Sárvár. So there's like a lot of evidence that he really knew a lot more about what was going on than he ever told his family, including burying items for them on their friend's farm when they were taken to Auschwitz, and sending a letter to his sister in America saying that they're going on their last trip. So like he like really, I mean, maybe it was common knowledge at that time what was happening, but he's really an interesting guy. And working on this movie has really kind of brought him from being like someone who I mean, hardly knew his name to feeling very close to. And like, especially becoming a father and like, just imagining all of these things. But yeah, he was just like a really interesting guy. And let's see, what pictures do I have here? Maybe I should show a clip actually first. This is my grandma and Edith after the war. Oh, I do have that picture, but yeah, I'll play a clip first. Sorry, it's a little disorganized here. This is also from the Shoah tape. This is my grandma talking about, and her sister in this clip. And just talking about the experience of arriving at Auschwitz, which, yeah, I mean, just thinking about traumatic memory and just trying to understand better what she experienced, and also having the opportunity to like see her and her sister telling the same story. I think it's just really incredible. So here's another clip.
Then I remember the next thing we had to do is we all had to gather a suitcase, and we went into, they made us go into a certain house, a building. It was like a factory. And we could not leave unless with their permission.
All I can remember is that we were packing very little, and that we were taken into the ghetto, which was just an area in the town. I don't remember how long we were there exactly.
Now, at that time, your family consisted of your mother and father and your older sister, Alice, and the baby. What was the baby's name?
Anna.
And how old was Anna?
I think she was 6 years younger than us, so she must have been 8, not even 8.
We just were there, and then we were there for a couple of months, 2-3 months, and then they took us all on a train with one little suitcase and
what was
nothing
in
else.
The suitcase?
They told us just a few things because we'd be coming back. Just we're going to go for a few days. And everybody packed a little suitcase, and we took that. And we went on a train.
When the train stopped,
The doors opened, and a bunch of German soldiers standing by. And there was one who would hold up his hand and wave you to the right or wave you
now
to the
that's
left.
as you're getting off the train?
Off the train, yes. I believe my father went to the right, and my mother, my little sister, went to the left. My sister went to the right,
Alice.
and I was supposed to go to the left. And I ran after her.
And no one saw?
No, they didn't. There was kind of a commotion, you know. You go to the left, you go to the right. I don't think they were really watching it that closely. If you were tall enough, fat enough, I was little, I was chubby. She was tall, she was more slender. She looked perhaps at that time a little older. And so she was waiting to go.
How much older was she?
Alice is about 16 months older than me.
So she would have been almost 16. What was your first impression?
I was very scared. Very scared. Don't know where you are. Suddenly, you're separated from everyone. It was felt like a little ant in this big world. And I was very close to my mom. When I saw her leave, sort of ended my I never get over this, ever. If you're 100 years old, you don't get over it. You don't forget it. You can't forget it. It was like yesterday. That's how clear it is.
And I always feel if anybody comes here, I'll shoot him. I have a gun. I know how to use it. It'll never happen to me again or my family.
Did your mother look to you? Did she try to speak to you? Did she look at you?
My mother, no. She stood. She couldn't speak. We moved so fast. But I remember looking back and I saw her sister.
Were they alone together, or
They were holding hands.
All right, Michael, I'm going to cut you off just in the interest of time because we have a ton of questions coming in.
Okay, sure.
You guys have a lot more great stuff to show us, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Okay, great. So the first question, just going off the presentation and thinking about like language choices, is that you talked a lot about memory and the importance of memory, and I noticed that your grandmother called it a memorial in her interview, and you call it a monument, and I was wondering if you could talk to us about that choice.
Oh, well, yeah. I think I use both terms just because well, from my understanding, like a monument is part of a memorial. Like the memorial can encompass a lot of things. And I mean, even in terms of time, like the memorial for 9/11, in a sense, even though it's now like a real thing in downtown New York City, like in a sense, it started with people just posting pictures all over the city for loved ones who had died, and it was just like kind of a continual process, while the monument is like one aspect of that, this kind of like stone frieze that kind of exists in that memorial landscape, I guess.
Thank you. And then we had a question from the group, and it was, you mentioned your great aunt and that she also gave a USC Shoah interview. Did you know her, and was she more open or less open in talking about her story?
You know, I knew her very well, but she died when I was younger. Like my grandma lived until I was 25, but my great aunt died when I was 13, I want to say. And so I just never had the chance to really talk, or I like never took the opportunity to talk to my grandma about it. But with my great aunt, it does feel like, well, I mean, she knew their history much better and like had much clearer memories. Like when my grandma went back to Sárvár for the first time, she had no memory of where anything was. Like she couldn't find their old house, the synagogue or anything. But my great aunt remembered everything really clearly. So it like would have been incredible to talk with her about it and hear more from her. She was like a lighter-hearted person, I think.
So someone in the chat has asked if you could show a picture of the monument again in the split screen, not to make you share screen again, but if you could, and kind of talk through why you understand it to look the way that it does and what's on the plaque and just all of the details of that.
Well, that's like a big question there. It's like the whole movie, you guys. Here, let me see if I can share this. So let me show that monument one more time. This is a card, actually, if you can see it here. I'll just skip forward a little bit here. But here's the monument itself. And my grandma said, you know, it's like an abstract form, more or less. And I think she liked that about it. Like she said that people would ask her what it was, and she would say, whatever you want it to be. I mean, to me, it definitely looks like a tombstone and a coffin kind of shape. It definitely has that kind of like somber, austere quality. The like artist pictured it as one kind of slab of stone that was broken and titled it Breaking. But yeah, I mean, there's like a lot to it. The one thing that Izzy pointed out last week, because I kind of had a talk with her, was like, you know, I was telling her about my grandma who had left this monument for me and my brother, and she said, "What language is it in? English?" And I said, "Well, no, it's in Hungarian." And she was like, "Well, who is it for then?" And that was like a really interesting point. I thought that my grandma did want it to be for this town that she was so like disappointed in and so traumatized by, that her neighbors would, most of her neighbors would sit back and allow this to happen. And I'm sure there was a lot of like small acts of resistance. Like she like they had this Catholic family that they were close with, who like even in the ghetto, they would bring milk to my grandma and her sisters, and just little things like that. But I think the experience of going to Sárvár and just finding there was no evidence of Jewish people there was like just almost being re-traumatized to the experience of what happened, to find that like your whole community had disappeared, and wanting to make it unable to ignore it. The like people there like would have to like acknowledge what happened. And this monument is right in the middle of town. Like there's a giant castle in the middle of town, which is like the kind of big tourist attraction. And this thing is on the castle grounds. And when you listen to my grandma's interview with the Shoah Foundation, when they ask her to talk about her childhood, she talks about how like after Shabbat services on Saturday mornings and Friday nights, she and her family would walk around the castle, walk around this park, and she and her friends would gather there. So even before the monument was built, just her going back there, the site was already like a memorial space for her. And she talks about how, you know, because she like didn't know where her old house was. She just couldn't remember anything. And so she had called her old friend, who was also a survivor from Sárvár, living in Australia. And he was asking her like, where is like the monument going to be? And she was kind of describing where she had planned it. And he's like, oh, I know where it is. That's right across the street from your house. And it was. When she went back with her sister actually showed her where the old house was, which was still standing. And it's just this idea of like, kind of like accessing that memorial space, that's like wanting to make something that's like protective and kind of still torn. You know, it's like this like wound has not been healed. Wanting to make something that like might protect future generations, and like turning this space that for her was already this site of memory into something that other people could also enter with this monument. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Adele wants to know, how did the local population react when your grandmother showed up kind of out of the blue and wanted to build a monument? And then I'm going to add to her question, did she talk to other people from Sárvár that she knew, other survivors? Like, was it a group effort? Like, what was the process of, idea to monument creation?
Well, with your question, Izzy, yeah, I think she was in touch with a lot of other survivors. Like, a monument is extremely expensive to make, and the town of Sárvár, at least the mayor at that time, and kind of like the city government, were very supportive of it and offered to help pay part of the cost, and offered to have it in this park in the middle of town rather than at the Jewish cemetery, which was outside of town and totally in shambles. And so they were very supportive of it, but she was also very weirded out by that too. She it was a weird experience for her coming from the last time she was there, which was when she was 17, having found her way back there after Auschwitz and found other people living in their house who had no interest in leaving. And then to kind of come back and kind of be embraced as almost like a monument herself. I think she was kind of distrustful of that. And even, I visited this monument with a couple Jewish people. One who's I think the only practicing Jewish person who lives in Sárvár, who's not from there, but had moved there a couple years earlier. And then a guy from Budapest. And the guy from Budapest, I was seeing this monument for the first time. I was very excited, very moved. And he was just how do I explain this? Towns put up these monuments, but they don't have any interest in feeling like they have to take responsibility for what happened. And so it was very different coming from my point of view as her grandson versus being a Jewish person in Hungary right now and how they might feel about it. I didn't interact with very many Gentiles there. I met some, but anyway, I hope that answers the question in some way.
Yeah, there's another question actually dovetailing on that. Has there been any damage to the monument since the rise of anti-Semitism in Hungary?
As far as I know, no. When I went there, the bigger town close by, Szombathely, where my grandma's mom was from, and that's a bigger town. It's a college town of 80,000. And the rabbi, I met the rabbi there who dedicated this monument. So I went to Szombathely, and their Holocaust monument had been vandalized. Pieces of it had been stolen, and it was it was a problem. He was very hesitant to say it was vandals and maybe it was just people wanting to sell the menorah for scrap metal or something. But yeah, I mean, Hungary, they are having a resurgence of young Jewish people who are kind of making their own culture there right now. But the government, at least, is very difficult, I think, to live under as a Jewish person. Very scary.
I'm going to ask you one last question because we're approaching 8, and it's going to be a doozy. But you talked about how your grandmother was so excited to come to America and how she kind of embraced the American culture so readily, and maybe instead of, you know, bringing in her culture from the old country, and also like with your film schedule being disrupted with coronavirus and all of, you know, what's happening right now, how do you like reckon with this idea of a monument, this idea of memorial, this idea of space and potentially vandalism within the larger national conversation around monuments and trauma and vandalism? And that's a tough one to throw at you last, but.
Well, it's like a really important question, I think. Like in a sense, I feel lucky to kind of have been given the opportunity to kind of hit pause on making this movie, and being unable to travel to keep shooting, and then seeing all of a sudden like monuments in our country kind of like totally taking over and being on the news all the time. I think, I mean, yeah, it's like a complicated question. I'm not sure how much time we have, but I think there's real parallels between America and Hungary in how we deal with past trauma that our countries have committed, and our sort of like inability to reckon honestly with them. Like being in Hungary was really fascinating because when I was there last year, it was kind of like here now in the sense that like monuments were like what everyone was talking about, because it kind of caught me off guard, because in Budapest there are so many like monuments to the Holocaust. Like on like every street downtown there's like some figure who saved Jewish people in stone, or the shoes on the river where people had just been lined up and shot. But when I met my host there, who was Jewish, he was just saying how like Hungary has no Holocaust memorial. I was like, what are you talking about? Like I just saw like a dozen of them, you know? But he was saying how the like government has never built a Holocaust, like just like a national Hungarian Holocaust memorial, the way that Germany has the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in the middle of Berlin, that kind of like enormous labyrinthic like tomb array of tombs, you know, that you can just get lost in right in the center of their capital. And Hungary thought that that was coming in 2014 on the 70th anniversary of the deportations to Auschwitz. There was this big new monument being unveiled, World War II monument. And then when people saw it, it was an eagle representing Germany attacking the Archangel Gabriel representing Hungary, with the inscription to all the victims. And so Jewish people and like a lot of others were very outraged by this, just like Germany attacking Hungary. Like Hungary was an ally of Germany, just like any basic history book would prove that this monument is not like historically accurate, but that was the message that the government wanted to put out there at that time. There were like protests there night and day, and finally the police came in and cleared it all out, and they built the monument under cover of darkness one night, and there has still never been a dedication for it. And what's really beautiful is that since then, there's kind of been like this fence erected up in front of it where like Jewish people have come and like left family items, like left notes, photos, journals, like eyeglasses, combs, everything saying like, this is what actually happened. And so now the like monument is this kind of like the actual stone monument and this living monument in front of it. That is like, it could be cleared out at anytime. And like I was just like asking, you know, my guide, like, why don't they just come here and clear this out? And he said they're afraid of what the people would do. And I really felt like that was just interesting here, like looking at what's happening here now and just seeing the like emotion come out around memory and monuments and the sort of struggle that's happening and like how to navigate that. It's just very emotional, and like every generation is going to like interact with these monuments in a new way. And so it's like, I think it's helpful to like think about, you know, like even my grandma's monument here, it's like not a static thing, even though it's made out of stone and it's just sitting there at the end of this walkway in this park. Like it's something that is like fused with memory, and it's something that is constantly changing. Like we're like my daughter is going to look at this a completely different way. The children of people in Sárvár right now, whose maybe grandparents were Aerocross members, are going to find something different here. And the monument itself is just part of like the memory landscape that we're talking about. And so even here, seeing how like, you know, if like a statue of Robert E. Lee is vandalized or transformed by protesters, like I think it's like interesting to like think about those actions as not separate from the actions of the same people that made that monument, who had their own political views, but might have had the money to actually build a statue of this guy on a horse. And it's just a constantly changing memorial. And like seeing how the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond has been turned into something new, it's still part of the continuing conversation around memory in this country.
Wow. That's all. Thank you so much for that answer and for your time. And I think I speak for everyone on this call when I say we would love to be kept appraised of the progress on this once, you know, the world opens up again and you can keep going with the filming. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want to thank you for your time, and I'll give you the last word if you'd like it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's really emotional. It kind of catches me off guard. Like I don't give presentations on this movie because it's still like very much in the process of being made, and it's just very emotional to get to talk to you guys and just see everyone here looking who also has like a bond to this past. Like I feel like you guys understand what it's about, and so please keep in touch. We have a website which is monumentfilm.org. My email address is reallightfilms@gmail.com, and just please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or anything like that.
Thank you. Great. It is 8:07, so I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening. It is 5:07 where Michael is, so I hope he has a great beginning of his evening.
Thank you.
And I'll see you all next week.
Can everyone hear me now? I just want to thank Michael Turner for taking the time to talk about his film and family history. We are looking forward to viewing it once it's complete. Thank you as well to Isabel Corman for moderating tonight's program. We are so pleased to see such wonderful representation from our 3G community. We look forward to our next program on Tuesday, July 21st, in partnership with the Yukon Center for Judaic Studies and Contemporary Jewish Life. We will hear from another author in 3G, David Slucky, as he discusses memory and the third generation. His book is entitled Sing This at My Funeral, a memoir of fathers and sons. We hope that you will join us then. When you have a moment, I encourage you to check out Voices of Hope's website and Facebook page to see all that our organization has to offer. In addition to the programs such as these that we provide to the community, we work every day on our primary mission, which is to support education about the Holocaust and genocide. If you like today's program, donations are greatly appreciated and can be made on the Voices of Hope website. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Michael, for sharing your journey through creating this movie. It was fascinating.